For more stories like these, go to www.social-tv.co.za, subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on our social mediums.
You're listening to our social newscast with me, Sam Marshall, brought to you by www.social-tv.co.za. And today we do a telephonic conversation with Kerry Lee Pascal, the Executive Trustee at Social Impact Initiative Nation Builder, and she's sharing their insights on how South Africa's non-profit organizations have to create new innovative financing models to deal with the extraordinary humanitarian crisis created by COVID-19. Kerry, from a nation builder perspective, talk to us about NPOs needing to find new funding models in SA at the moment.
Absolutely. So Nation Builder actually sits between the donor community and the not-for-profit community. So we have communities in Gauteng, KZN, Western Cape, who meet every second month, or did meet every second month in person, but now we're meeting online. And really trying to figure out how we work better together. And it's been fascinating throughout the COVID season, looking at the things that have started setting. So historically, obviously, we have all been talking about sustainability within the not-for-profit space. And the biggest aspect that we've been pushing is self-generated income, because if somebody can, self-generate income, then you need less donor entities to be partnering with you. And so that's been a big push over the last couple of years. And some not-for-profits who we'd normally say are really shooting the lights out are generating somewhere between 40, and I actually met somebody the other day who was generating 80% of their income through self-generated income. And so those are sort of shining stars until COVID hit. And so the people who are self-generating income couldn't generate a cent anymore, and they didn't have a big donor base. And so I think it's been interesting for us to start the conversations around sustainability again, and that look at actually sustainability all relies on a diversified portfolio of income streams. So self-generated is amazing, but you also need to have private philanthropists. You need to have CSI funding. If you can have foreign aid, that would be amazing. If you get government funding, that would be good. Just so that your eggs aren't in one basket, so that when something unexpected happens, you're actually able to still weather the storm. But I suppose with COVID, it's actually impacted on multiple levels. Your CSI has been impacted. Not immediately, but we're actually seeing it now, where a lot of the CSI departments and people within our network have either had their funding frozen, so no more increases, or they've had it drastically reduced. There's even been some departments that have been made redundant. So there's definitely a wave of shrinkage in the donor community that we're going to experience more and more. And so we're needing to think cleverly on how we actually start focusing on impact. So how do we have the greatest impact with the much smaller amount of resourcing available with the economic climate, not only nationally, but actually globally.
How painful is that conversation at the moment, Kerry, about becoming a self-generating organization? Now, as you've mentioned, some organizations will be dealing with that issue incredibly well. For many of them, it's trying to find a light switch in the dark.
Yeah, I think the not-for-profits who had very big chunks of their income base from self-generated income are definitely feeling it. So they're needing to be quite innovative in how they try to plug the gaps until they can start operating again and providing the services that they were charging for. But the reality is that there's actually not much at the moment to look at from a plugging these gaps perspective, outside of finding innovative ways to partner with the donor community that still has some kind of resourcing available. So we've seen some really beautiful open conversations taking place. So, one of the things that Nation Builder focuses on a lot is how do we level the playing field and have not-for-profits and the donor community truly partner as peers and not as sort of an unequal playing field where one is more powerful than the other, purely due to resources. And what's been beautiful to see is the siloed approach that we've seen in the sector quite a lot, where the not-for-profit and the donor community don't really talk as much as they should, or maybe don't always understand one another as much as they could. We're seeing that breaking down now, and we're seeing these two sectors really looking to one another for solutions, because the donor community actually doesn't fully know where the best place is going to be to put this smaller amount of resources that they have. And the not-for-profit community is seeing all the need out there and have great insights into what's happening on the ground. So, I mean, the positive that we're seeing out of all of this is that there are really constructive conversations happening between the donor community and the implementing community, and coming up with some really clever ways of working together, collaborative approaches, not-for-profits sharing resources and infrastructure. So there's been some really exciting stuff coming out of it, even though it's been quite a difficult season and will continue to be for probably about another year or more.
With all these beautiful conversations, as you mentioned, Kerry, happening all around us, the NPOs and the sectors speaking with each other, non-profit organizations are still struggling though. They're still trying, still under massive pressure to deliver services. And at the same time, they're expected to deliver these services even when the money is drying up.
Mm.
How do we balance that? How do we still make sure that an NPO can operate?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very good question, and it's something that we've been asking a lot within our community in these discussions between these two sectors. So if you look at what's been happening nationally, the private or the businesses that have been taking strain because of lockdown and not being able to function optimally have had some kind of relief funds. And I know not everybody's been able to access them, but there's been some kind of relief funds available to them to access to try and help businesses weather the COVID storm. And what's been interesting is the not-for-profits are unable to access quite a lot of these, actually most of them. So they've had very little organizational support financially through these mechanisms that have been put in place. But they're the ones that are actually carrying the weight of the strain that our country is feeling. So there's a fund called the GAP Fund that was set up by the Gon Foundation. And this fund is specifically a conduit for different donor entities to put their money into and then be able to distribute it to different organizations that need some kind of buffer to keep them afloat and their organizations healthy to be able to weather the COVID storm. And so I sit on that committee that looks at the applications, and I was looking at an application the other day, and one of the not-for-profits used to provide meals for 40 families a week, and they are now providing meals for 750. And that just shows you the massive increase in demand that these not-for-profits are facing. And so the economy has actually opened up a little bit already. So the reality is that they probably are going to end up 500 plus that they're going to be servicing for the next year or so. And their funding model was actually based on 40. So we really do need to look at it from a governmental level. So as a community, the Nation Builder community, we are in conversation with the Department of Social Development to try and understand what mechanisms are available there that we can access. We have a community that's really looking at food mapping at the moment to try and understand where the distribution is, how the distribution is working, so that we can optimize those and figure out how to provide food parcels and assistance in the most cost-effective and efficient way that is of absolute quality. So there's multiple aspects where we are in conversation and trying to find innovative solutions where we can meet. I mean, these are all new demands, new challenges that we're seeing. And so it's been encouraging to see how everybody is just coming together, not-for-profits, business, even government. And it's been lovely to see how they're coming together and talking about it and going, so now what do we do? We have this increase, and so how does this look going forward? And so we don't necessarily, I can't give you the golden answer. I think if we had the perfect answer, we'd all be doing it and we'd be out of the woods in the next couple of months. But I think it's encouraging that people are actually coming together and are putting all their weight behind figuring out how to make sure that we can look after our most vulnerable in the nation.
I assume, Kerry, that if everybody is collaborating, they're talking, that there has to be some measure of trust Now, we know that South Africa historically has a silo mentality. We've seen it in private and public sector. Are organizations being as honest as they can be at the moment? How have you found the honesty level amongst the parties working together?
Yeah, that's been actually really amazing to see. The level of trust and the amount of transparency is through the roof. So I think people have realized that they can't hide behind guises at the moment. So the not-for-profits are needing to tell people exactly what's happening. Because if they don't, it's very possible that they're not going to be able to make it through. So they have to be totally transparent with what is happening, what the strain is on their organization, what the strain is on their staff, because staff are starting to burn out from 3 months of just non-stop work in very stressful situations with increased loads. Your donor community is having to be like very, very honest about the fact that their financials are looking different to what they were predicted to look like, and that they are needing to reduce funding, and they are needing to look at different mechanisms. So the donor community is having to be very real about their situations. And government has also, it's actually been really nice to see how government's been going, look, this thing is so much bigger than all of us. We actually do need to figure out how to work together, because the more hands that can push forward, the better. And so it has been wonderful to see how receptive. I haven't seen as a receptive an environment in the years that I've been working in the social investment sector, which is over 10 years now. I haven't seen such a receptive environment. So it's been very encouraging.
Is the idea, and maybe I should structure this question a little bit differently, there is a perception that NPOs are getting funding. When you hear the amounts of money that banks have thrown at various problems within this pandemic period, when you hear of big organizations, the Motsepes, the Ruperts, putting in billions of rands, there's an idea that NPOs are well supported. Is that the case?
I mean, I think the media has done really well, where we have seen big donors, big corporate institutes putting finances into, a lot of them into the Solidarity Fund. So a lot of your big corporates have been channeling funds through the Solidarity Fund. And it's a great fund that the government has put together. That fund specifically focuses on relief for food, for shelter, and for medical equipment. So there is funding going into the relief work. It is quite difficult for the not-for-profit sector to access, because the channels that it's being distributed through, if you're not directly connected to that channel, it's quite difficult to figure out how to apply for it. And I do know some not-for-profits that have managed to access funding for relief work specifically, but actually the bigger proportion of not-for-profits that I know haven't been able to access any of the big funds that have been set up. And so a lot of the not-for-profits actually are not getting that additional funding. And any funds that they are getting are 100% earmarked for relief. So they're only for food and for providing shelter. There's nothing to do with helping them increase their capacity. I mean, imagine your staff complement that services 40 families suddenly increases to service 720 families. And now you have to try and figure out how to increase your staff complement in alignment with that. I mean, that's huge when it comes to organizational capacity and just amount of people and resources and kitchens that you're going to require. But the funding doesn't actually allow for that. So the not-for-profits are struggling. They're battling to access funding that allows them to expand to the extent that they need to be able to meet the needs that are out there.
In terms of numbers, Kerry, what are we talking about? Because I've engaged with a couple of NPOs that have painted a dire picture. One of, if we don't get support, we might have to close this much needed intervention for this community. What is the numbers telling you at the moment from a nation builder perspective?
Sure. So I wish there was a survey that I knew about that actually had solid data around the amount of not-for-profits that have closed or are on the verge of closing. So I don't know about anything out there that actually shows that in a tangible way. But I mean, the reality is what you see. The reality is that everybody is just under strain. So Mergon Foundation, who Nation Builder is actually part of, has quite a large portfolio of not-for-profits that they work with. And the portfolio of not-for-profits are all experiencing the same pressures, where the resourcing is tight and the capacity is overstretched. And then our nation builder not-for-profit community, which is a bigger community, really the same thing applies across the board. So I can't give you numbers, I can't give you size of the crisis, but I mean, I'm sure it's in line with what you're seeing when it comes to the way that businesses are falling off, if not more.
Can I put you in the hot seat quickly? Give us a projection for the next 9 to 12 months. We need various industries, we need different role players to have a more constructive conversation. They're having conversations, but we need more conversations with tangible outcomes. If we don't pull together in the right direction, and let's say 9 to 12 months, we're still talking, what is your projections?
Sure. I mean, the not-for-profit sector is really integral in rebuilding from what COVID has done when it comes to the family unit, where income has stopped because people have lost jobs, or the amount of people that are unemployed and in poverty has increased. So if the not-for-profit sector isn't able to stay strong enough and be around in its current strength, if not stronger, it should actually be stronger because the need is going to be stronger. We are going to have incredibly difficult time trying to build up our nation, because we are going to just have a huge problem on our hands with lots of people that are just vulnerable, incredibly vulnerable. So, I mean, I definitely I can't predict exactly what's going to happen in the next couple of months, but I can say that we do need to make sure that the not-for-profit sector is going to be well equipped and well capacitated to be able to provide the services that our country is going to need to be able to assist us in rebuilding and moving forward.
Kerry, thank you very much for your time and sharing your insights with us. Hopefully we'll continue, maybe touch base with Nation Builder in a couple of months from now, once there is a clear plan on a vaccine and what the next steps are.
Absolutely. And we'll let you know if we come up with any amazing solutions.
Kerry Lee, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for your time.
That's Kerry Lee Pascal, the Executive Trustee at Social Impact Initiative Nation Builder, talking to us about why South Africa's non-profit organizations are in dire need of an innovative new financing model to deal with the extraordinary humanitarian crisis created by COVID-19.